Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today is Sunday, November 1st, 2015. My name is Derrick Broze, and you are listening to the Conscious Resistance Live. Thank you guys for tuning in to another week of my top stories, my ideas behind the issues facing us in not only America, but across the world, and of course, solutions for how we can face these problems and move ourselves as individuals and the world itself collectively towards a more free, more awakened, more aware, more educated position, more informed position, and from that standpoint be able to create the solutions that I think that we're all after and all of the beautiful varieties that it will look like. So thank you for joining me today. I have 3 little sections of stories I want to cover based on my top articles of the week and of course the most recent information from theconsciousresistance.com. And then in the second half of the show, which will probably run about 45 minutes today, I'm going to discuss meditation. And the reason I want to do this is because if you were sitting here, if you're watching the video, or if you go to theconsciousresistance.com, you'll notice at the top there is our logo, the banner, with a sitting person meditating, and in lotus position, it looks like. And well, I figure since our logo has someone meditating, we might as well talk to you about what exactly meditation is, what it has to do with my work and the work of the Conscious Resistance Network team, and what it has to do with my book, The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. I think some of you already get it and understand the concept behind my particular philosophy, which is basically that freedom is the guiding principle, the individual freedom and respect for others as individuals and their ability to find their path in life. And that leads me to anarchy. But at the same time, recognizing that we are not ready for anarchy yet, and that a world without a conscious evolution, a healing experience, would undoubtedly be not a fun place, let's say that, until we get through that healing. So that's the basis of the conscious resistance. But how does meditation play a role in that? We'll talk more about that in the second half. Before we start, though, I want to remind you guys, please follow us on Facebook. If you use Facebook, the Conscious Resistance Network, we've been seeing some growth recently, and I'm thankful for everyone who's given us those likes and sharing content. And of course, if you're interested in actually sharing your content, you can contact me at derrick@theconsciousresistance.com through email, or just go to our contact page on the website and you can become a contributor. We have new contributors joining, every few weeks or so I get a message from someone new. And this is what it is, a platform for us to share all of our ideas, as long as they are, for the most part, focused on solutions and positive, and, not to say that we can't take note of the ills of the world. We absolutely do. And you hear me talk about all sorts of scary, not fun stuff, but I want us to talk about the solutions too. So yeah, follow us on Facebook, The Conscious Resistance Network. You can follow us on Twitter at TheConsciousRN. And if you want to interact with me on Twitter, you can do so at DBroseLiveFree. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/consciousresistance, where we're constantly putting out new content from me. This podcast you're hearing now, I also divided up each of the stories into their own videos, which are, just a few minutes long. So if you want to digest them that way, you can do so, or you can listen to the whole podcast at once. But we've got that. We've got interviews from our other contributors. We've got new vlogs from other team members, and I go out and do interviews. I'm about to start doing more man on the street interviews. It's been a long time, and I really want to make this a regular part of my activism, because I love talking to people, and I think it's an effective way to spread a message, not only to the people on the street, but if the video gets seen by a few thousand people and ideas get spread that way, it's a fun time. So yeah, you'll find all that on our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, and thank you to everyone who's been a part of this journey the past couple of years, because as I said, it's November now. I officially launched the Conscious Resistance Network in its current form in November 2013, after I came home to Houston from hosting Adam versus the Man for Adam Kokesh, my friend Adam Kokesh, while he was in jail for his shotgun incident in Washington, D.C. And before that, theconsciousresistance.com had been around for about a year, and it was generally just focused on my work as an individual. Now, all that, my individual work is still there, but it's, as I said earlier, it's a team of people now who are really just helping it grow. And, there's the people behind the scenes who build the website and work on that end, people who schedule social media posts, people who contribute stuff, myself helping in a number of ways. So it really is a team effort, and I'm thankful. So woohoo, we made it 2 years and it's grown, and it's not exactly yet what I want it to be. I still want more contributors in the areas of yoga and food, cooking shows, solutions. I want it to be a multi-channel network for all your one-stop shop for anarchy, spirituality, solutions, and healthy, positive ideas on how we can overcome the state. So yeah, but we're getting in that direction, and I'm thankful for that. So thank you to everyone who's been supporting. Now, before we get into my news stories, of course, I write several articles of varying length for a number of websites throughout the week, and those can be found at derrickbroze.contently.com. You can find all of my articles throughout the week. And I go over the top ones for this podcast, as well as my ideas on other topics of interest. But what I want to share with you first is our most recent contributions to theconsciousresistance.com. Now, I'm going to get into this more in a moment, but since I'm not using Facebook, which is generally where I would release a lot of my thoughts, my rants, my musings, and my positive affirmations, I've been needing a new outlet for this. So I've been doing a lot more video content, but also I started this journal page here on the website. You can go to consciousresistance.com and look at the journal tab, and basically that's going to be the network journal, where you'll find updates about what we're doing at the network, what's new, who's joined us, what exciting things are coming up. But also it's going to be my personal blog. So I started that blog here, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But that's one new update. And we have some new content from Liberty Under Attack. I cannot recommend this enough. Libertarian Role Modeling, How to Outgrow the State. Please, 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 please check that one out. I wrote one called Another Doctors Without Borders Hospital Bombed, which is exactly as it sounds. Check that information if you want to know more about that. And I've got clips from all the short clips from last week's podcast, including why is Neil deGrasse Tyson promoting geoengineering, what they're not telling you, what the media won't tell you about the NDA 2016, Senate-approved surveillance bill, massive cybersecurity. So all those are there. And I also read my article for Mint Press News, Researchers are in the Throes of a Psychedelic Revival. That audio on video is now available there. And we have a new contribution from our team member, friend, awesome person, Katie Chaos, who has been gone for a few months as she's brought a child into this crazy world. And she gives her take on that, and basically it's her birthing story. I think she had a home birth, or definitely she's a midwife. So there's some interesting information there for those who are parents or thinking about being a parent. It is awesome to see conscious, awakened individuals choosing to have children, because we need more of that. I'm not sure if I'll ever be a parent myself, but I think that I definitely support all those who are bringing kids into this world with the principles of freedom and respecting them, and definitely the ideas of peaceful parenting. So that's all at our website. Check that out. Now, as I said, I started this blog, and I posted one just yesterday or the day before, called Fall is in the Air and I Feel a Shift Coming. Go ahead and check all that out if you want to hear more of my specific thoughts. But I talk a little bit about some research I've been doing the past several months, and how that research influenced my talk at Liberty Fest in New York City. My talk, of course, was about creating alliances between radical anti-authoritarian thinkers and activists across the political spectrum. And I'm also working on a new video on the quote-unquote first American individualist anarchist, Josiah Warren, that I've been doing as part of my research, and that'll be available within a week or so. But I've also been taking some of that research and putting it into my writing for my next book that I'm working with John Vibes, which is going to be the second book in the Conscious Resistance trilogy. It's called Finding Freedom in an Age of Confusion. So look more into that. And if you want to find all those details, of course, you can check that blog. Like I said, the journal page on theconsciousresistance.com is where you'll find that. And then just yesterday, I posted my top articles of the week. As I said, this is something I do on a weekly basis. It typically was done on Facebook, but as I'm not doing that, it'll be now done on theconsciousresistance.com, which will just encourage you to visit our website directly, which is what I prefer. I don't want to use Facebook as much. I appreciate the Facebook follows and all that stuff, but let's use our website directly as much as possible. So if you're interested to see all of the articles I wrote this past week, they're listed right there with the outlets I wrote them for, with direct links to them at your convenience. You can look at those. For now, though, we're going to dive into several of those stories, which I think are of importance, ranging from Guantanamo Bay torture to the state of genetically modified foods and the corporatism between the U.S. government and the corporations behind that product, and of course, surveillance news. Before we get into meditation, what is meditation? So stay tuned. Earlier this week, it was announced that the Obama administration is continuing to fight the release of Guantanamo Bay force-feeding videos. I wrote this for Ben Swan's Truth in Media. More than a year after a federal judge ordered the release of videos showing force-feeding at Guantanamo Bay, the Obama administration continues to fight. Oh, of course Obama continues to fight. This is something that's been disturbing to me the whole time that he's been in office, and how most of his supporters just completely ignore this aspect of his presidency. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Gladys Kessler denied a request from the Obama administration which sought to reverse a previous ruling by Kessler that ordered the release of videos showing the force feeding of a former Guantanamo Bay detainee. The Washington Post reports that Judge Kessler called the abuse of prisoners being held without charges a, quote, burning controversial issue in this country. In October of last year, Kessler ruled that the Obama administration must unseal 32 videotapes related to the force feeding of the man Abu Wael Diab, who was then being held without a charge at the military prison in Gitmo, Cuba. Diab was kidnapped by the Pakistani government in 2002 before being handed over to the United States on suspicion of terrorism. That's what they call rendition, but it's kidnapping, adult napping. At the end of 2014, after 12 years behind bars with no trial, Diab was finally released to Uruguay, which is, of course, not his home, but that's the only place he can really go since he's got this terrorist stamp on his back now, thanks to the U.S. government and their false war on terror. The violence and force-feeding procedures that he experienced in Guantanamo Bay have caused permanent damage to his health, and he is now confined to a wheelchair because they messed with him so much. Isn't that great? U.S. taxpayer, you are paying for that. FYI. Just putting that out there. The videos in question show him being subjected to violent forced cell extraction, or FCE as they like to call it, and force feeding. The force feeding sessions began after he refused to eat. Diab's lawyers allege that he was subject to this process over 1,300 times. He'd been protesting his treatment and conditions at the prison by participating in a hunger strike, which at one point, if you'll remember, had spread to 100 detainees in this facility. Now, I don't know if you've viewer have kept up with the story, but if you follow my work for more than a year or so, then you've read my articles and the older podcasts, this is something that I have kept up with. The release of these videos and also the protests at Guantanamo Bay, the hunger strike, it's still going on. The numbers, we have no idea now, because at one point, once it started to get media attention, Guantanamo Bay officials basically said they were going to stop releasing details about how many people were participating in it. And they no longer do that, and this is basically those who are choosing to participate in the hunger strike, they're being force-fed. And some of you, I hope none of you think this way who are listening to my work, but it never surprises me the kind of people who come across my work. But some of you may be thinking, well, those people were responsible for 9/11, or they're terrorists, or whatever, so they deserve that, or all I needed to know about Islam I learned on 9/11, or something stupidly ignorant like that. But the thing is, many of these people have been, as this man, kidnapped and taken away from their homes and put in prison, a private military prison where no one has access to them, where they have no constitutional rights or protections of any kind, for whatever rights are worth. And they are trying to protest that, and so they refuse to eat. And because it's, all international laws would say that, you know, if somebody is refusing to eat and they're dying, like it's torture to force feed them, you know. So people try to protest in this matter to, you know, this way to force their views, or to get spur some action, really, is what he's hoping to do. Bring some international attention to the situation and possibly, you know, change it. Well, instead they start force feeding people. So the government requested that Judge Kessler reconsider her decision. As I said last year, she told them they had to release 32 videos of this, and the government had the whole time has fought it and said that, you know, there's going to be danger to national security, but she didn't buy it. The judge did not buy this. The Post reports that edited versions of 8 of 32 videos and 2 compilation videos of him with information such as the voices and faces of prison workers redacted have already been handed over. So there's 8 versions that are edited. And the judge said the importance of releasing the videos to the public in order to enlighten the citizenry and improve perceptions of the proceedings' fairness cannot be overstated. So she's basically saying we can't allow this to stay in this secrecy, which is what the Obama administration wants. Because if the United States, not only are they allowing this torture to happen, but if the torture happens and then they just cover it all up and under a veil of secrecy, it's much worse. So the judge is offering some, you know, sane advice here and saying we need to let this information come out, and I don't buy your belief that it's going to harm national security. Kessler's 9-page order stated that the government had not offered any evidence to support their claims that releasing the classified videos would somehow endanger the national security of the United States. And as I said, she's clashed with them throughout this case. And the Obama administration is expected to appeal once more before the tapes are officially released to the public. And the Obama administration as well, I'll remind you, tried to use Executive Order 13,526 to deny the release of the tapes. Judge Kessler at the time said it would, quote, would displace the court's power to seal its own record, putting that authority in the government's hands alone. She also stated the judiciary has the discretion to seal or unseal a judicial record. So we're just seeing more of government secrecy, more of the Obama administration showing their true colors. This video doesn't have much shares. I hope those of you who see this and who care about this will share it some more. I think it's just another disturbing part of American history here that I hope people will not forget and that will get taught. You know, not only the torture that happened following 9/11 continues to happen, because make no mistake, the Obama administration has not stopped torturing, and the torture that's going on here at Guantanamo related to the hunger strikes. I hope all of this is exposed and continuously exposed, and that someday the people responsible will be held accountable for their actions, and we can see justice. Now, I want to move on to the topic of genetically modified foods, and this isn't going to cover the health related to that. This isn't going to cover the science behind that. This is strictly going to cover the corporatism that exists in this industry between the United States government and various agencies within the U.S. government. And yeah, some of it's going to venture off into pesticides, which are, of course, linked to genetically modified foods, because a lot of these genetically modified foods are created to be resistant to glyphosate and to other pesticides so that they can survive, and it allows farmers to use as much pesticide as they want. And of course, Monsanto also, one of the companies, has a hand in pesticides as well. So they create these crops that are ready to take on the pesticide and can handle it, won't die from it. And there's some interesting new science coming out related to that. So we're going to get into that. But first, we're going to talk about labeling. The U.S. Senate has held a hearing recently on GMO labeling, but apparently they were only interested in hearing one side of the argument. Several speakers at a recent Senate hearing on labeling foods that contain genetically modified organisms are connected to or have shown support for the big agriculture industry. The hearing, titled Agriculture Biotechnology, a look at federal regulation and stakeholder perspectives, comes in response to a bill passed by the U.S. House of Reps in July. This bill would create a federal voluntary standard for GMO labeling and block mandatory labeling efforts by states. Now, you guys may remember this. It's called the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, some more Orwellian speak. but it's also known as the Dark Act or Deny Americans the Right to Know Act by its critics. And this law would effectively nullify GMO labeling measures like the bill recently passed in Vermont. The Vermont law is scheduled to go into effect in July 2016. Maine and Connecticut, they've also passed laws which require labeling, but those measures do not go into effect until their bordering states also pass legislation. But all of those bills could be off the table, and states basically won't have the right to come up with their own labeling system. And the way they're selling this is basically, okay, so all the corporate entities are coming out and saying, we don't want a patchwork of state laws and local bills on GMOs and labeling, so we should pass a law that says that they can't do that, and instead we're going to create a federal standard created by us and our corporate partners, and everybody will have to abide by that federal standard and then go through our loopholes and our regulations to be a part of that. And if they don't do that, if they do anything else, it will be illegal. But you know what? Let me just sidebar here real quick. If this does happen, which I'm sorry to say, guys, usually all the bad things happen. We can pretty much say that the TPP is going to go through. There's this CISA surveillance bill. That's more than likely going to go through. Things like the NDA, when indefinite detention, that went through. I mean, these things get through. It's just too late in the game to think that anybody's going to stop these bills. We just have to accept it and find ways to counteract it, to counter-propagandize people with information about awareness and solutions. So, back to this. The U.S. Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry heard testimonies from several speakers representing farmers, the GMO lobby, and consumer groups. Officials from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, and the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, also testified. So all of these government officials related to food, drugs, Department of Agriculture, and the environment, and speakers representing all these different organizations. The hearing was a balanced look at the issues surrounding GMOs and biotechnology in general. At least, that's what the Senate wants you to believe. As Reuters reported, the Consumers Union and 5 other consumer organizations sent a letter to the Senate committee complaining that the lineup of speakers was not balanced and did not include a consumer representative. Jean Holloran, Director of Food Policy Initiatives for Consumers Union, said, time and time again, a large majority of consumers have expressed strong support for GMO labeling. Ronnie Cummins, International Director for the Organic Consumers Association and a speaker at the hearing, released a scathing review of the events. Today's hearing on H.R. 1599 made a total mockery of democracy. Of the 8 witnesses allowed to testify, only 1 could be remotely considered as someone who represents the interests of consumers and public health. The other 7 have ties to the biotech and corporate food industries and were there to represent the interests of corporations, not people. So a list of these industry witnesses include representatives from the American Soybean Association, National Corn Growers Association, and Food and Agriculture for the Biotechnology Industry Organization. All organizations that directly benefit from GMO technology, as of course soybeans and corn are the most heavily genetically modified products in the United States. So yeah, they have a stake being there one way or the other, but it's interesting the comments that were made. Perhaps unsurprisingly, a majority of the witnesses came out in support of giving the federal government more power and taking away influence from state and local governments. The American Soybean Association called on senators to, quote, come to the table and finalize a plan to establish a voluntary national framework for the labeling of foods containing GMOs. Brian Bainig, Vice President of Bio, expressed support for the bill. And, of course they're expressing support. This makes sense. Let me go on a little further. These statements are meant to sound empathetic to the consumer. They are actually deceptive propaganda from individuals representing institutions that will directly benefit from the passage of the Dark Act. The Organic Consumers Association compiled a list of witnesses' connections to the biotech industry. The pro-GMO website Grist said it did its best to portray the hearing as balanced and focused on the science behind GMOs. This is funny. As Grist wrote, of course this was the Agriculture Committee, and I'd expect some pro-GMO sentiments from Democrats with big constituencies of farmers. But I was also expecting to see some senators from more liberal states channeling anti-GMO concerns as well. Instead, I heard strong pro-GMO statements, and no senator planted a flag on anti-GMO ground. And again, I want to take a break here to say, I'm not talking anti-GMOs based on, whether or not you think they're going to make you sick. I personally don't want them and don't want to ingest them. And I also have seen the research which disproves these claims that it could save people in Africa or that GMOs are, feeding the world. No, that it's largely a failure to what it was pitched as, at least so far. Maybe the science will get better, but also ultimately people have a choice what they want to ingest, and companies will, if they're smart and they yield to the market, they will know that people want labeling, and they will voluntarily do that. And this is the government stepping in and taking away people's right to do that, and I don't support that. And also, the problem with supporting genetically modified food is just, even if the science, there's nothing wrong with it and it doesn't harm anybody. It's so, in the United States, there's so much corporatism around this industry with companies like Monsanto and Syngenta and Dow and others, that these industries are not surviving on their own. They're working together with the government. They're people go work for these companies and they come work for the government, and back and forth. And that's a major problem. So as long as that's going on, then I can't support that industry either. And that industry is also tied into the larger farming industrial complex, this massive mass scale farming, which is causing all sorts of problems and harmful effects to the environment and to the people, to the treatment of animals, and on and on and on. So in general, there's no moral way to support these industries at this point. So it goes on from here, and I just basically describe this GMO hearing. And yeah, I want to just kind of end here with what I wrote here in this article. Wherever you stand on the issue of GMOs, we should all recognize that each individual deserves to know what they're eating. The DARK Act will only make it more difficult for states and localities to find remedies to work for their specific environments and needs. The bill will also push the U.S. one step closer to full-on corporatocracy. But what are the solutions for fighting this corporatocracy? The Organic Consumer Association offers this message. Today, we call on millions of American consumers to contact their elected officials with this message. If you vote against states' rights, if you vote against truth and transparency in labeling, if you vote against the more than 90% of Americans who want mandatory, not voluntary labeling of GMO foods, we will vote against you. If you are not one for voting, you should get involved with a local community farm, urban farm, farmer's market, or even just start a backyard garden. And, that's one note I want to say there as well, is I'm not necessarily calling for the same thing that the Organic Consumers Association is. While I support the majority of their message and their cause, I'm not calling for mandatory labeling. I want voluntary labeling by companies. But as I've said, the people who are smart are going to do that already, and some companies have been doing that for a while now. They label their food free of genetically modified foods, and they have third-party testing through things like the Non-GMO Project, which is pretty big. And I know there's some people who are speculative of it, but skeptical of it. But I think they do a good job, and overall, there are companies who are choosing to do this without government force, and that's what I support. So I don't support the government coming in and forcing everybody to go through their federal voluntary program. I don't support the government coming in forcing everybody to go through their mandatory program. I support the consumer's right to know, and I think smart businesses will opt to do that and are already doing that. What I don't support as well is a government being so involved in these industries. Now move on to the next story here. The USDA has, just as, and tied in with this, the USDA, who is at this hearing talking about this DARK Act, they're actually just recently approved a new Monsanto corn. So, like I said, these industries are tied together. As they're having a hearing about GMO labeling, they're approving a new Monsanto corn, and this is something that they want to get into the industry and into your food, and they don't want you to have any idea that it's there, and they want to take away companies' ability to do that on their own. Amidst growing concern about Monsanto's products, the USDA has approved a new genetically modified corn variety from the corporation. Last Friday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture approved a new genetically modified type of corn produced by Monsanto. This comes from the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS. Reuters reports that APHIS conducted a review and concluded the product posed no significant threat to agricultural crops, other plants, or the environment. Monsanto's MON 87411 maize is designed to protect plants against corn rootworms, and have a tolerance to the herbicide glyphosate. Glyphosate is not only recognized as the most widely used herbicide in the world, it is a key ingredient to Monsanto's Roundup products. Now, before officially being allowed on the market, the US FDA and the EPA have to conduct their own reviews. So this has been approved by the USDA. It still has a couple more approvals to go through. And according to Reuters, the EPA's scientific advisory panel has criticized the guidelines as weak. The panel is attempting to understand the potential impact on pollinators, such as a dwindling bee population. Exactly. So hopefully more people will look at this and decide, some real science and real, if they're going to have some type of regulation, at least hopefully that they'll use it in some way that's going to be helpful to the people rather than bowing to their corporate partners. APHIS also said it was extending the comment period for genetically engineered corn developed by Syngenta Seeds. So there's another one, Syngenta and Monsanto being the two biggest biotech companies. So this is an interesting aspect here, though. The USDA's preliminary findings of Syngenta's petition found that 14 different glyphosate-resistant weed species exist as of 2014. The agency also stated the risk of herbicide-resistant weeds will continue to be an ongoing problem as long as herbicides are used. I mean, think about that. This is a government agency coming out and saying, look, what they're referencing basically is as the growth of genetically modified crops have come along, and as I said earlier, these genetically modified crops are created to be glyphosate resistant, which is what Syngenta and Monsanto are using. So the plants can fight off, glyphosate, and they can be sprayed with heavy pesticides and still survive. Well, Mother Nature, being the beast that she is, eventually all the grass and these weeds around that are being killed by glyphosate, they adapt and they become resistant. They become stronger. So then they have to come up with more pesticides. And this is what I'm saying is the increased use of GMOs increases the use of pesticides, and that causes problems in the soil, problems to the plants, problems to the animals, problems to humans, and also is creating these super weeds, these resistant. So they're saying that the resistant super weeds that are resistant to glyphosate is going to be an ongoing problem as long as they continue to use them. So, I mean, this is changing nature. Nature is having to adapt because of the effect that mankind is having on it, specifically these Monsanto, Syngenta people. Fighting herbicide resistance is only one of Monsanto's current problems, of course. In March of this year, we reported that the International Agency for Research on Cancer published a report in the Lancet Oncology journal detailing evaluations of organophosphate pesticides and herbicides. This report concluded that there was evidence of carcinogenity in humans for non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And of course, shortly after that, Monsanto's other pesticide Duo, it's a Duo Enlist pesticide herbicide that they're working on with Dow Chemical. It has been found to be possibly carcinogenic. So they've got products that are probably and possibly carcinogenic, and they want you to use them and spray your food with them. Read more about this article. Finishes up with a video from Ben Swan on Monsanto and crony capitalism. But as I just said, with this labeling bill and the Dark Act, these companies are so tied in with the government, they're going to get whatever they want. And people need to start really, this is the point where victory gardens is a real thing. Resistance gardens. This is real life. You got to start growing your own food and finding ways to fight this, because they're coming for your food and they're going to poison everything around it if they get their way. So grow your victory garden today. Now, this last story related to food, GMOs, pesticides, is, I think, one of the biggest stories to happen this week. And another one that, this is, although I don't really pay much attention to the mainstream, I do keep up with it. I don't watch it. I keep up with it peripherally. Like, for instance, I wake up Sunday today and I search, okay, what's going on with the Sunday, news shows, the Sunday programs, where they usually have lately they've been having all the presidential candidates and stuff on. So I want to see what they're talking about. And then I look to see what they're ignoring and what angles they're not sharing with people, and then I can find, well, okay, this is what people need to look at. It just helps me with my work. But to me, the story we're about to cover right now should be on the front page. This should be, I said the same thing about the CDC whistleblower who's talking about vaccinations, and whether or not you think the guy's full of shit or not, It doesn't matter. He's a CDC scientist, works at a government agency, has admitted to lying, has now taken up lawyers, whistleblower lawyers. A congressman has come out and spoke about it, said his office has documents on this stuff, and not a peep from the media, not a peep from any of the other people working. And that to me is disturbing, but it is the situation we are in. Now, this story, I feel similarly. This should be on the front pages. This should be on all the Sunday morning news, talk shows, political shows, asking why is a researcher, a scientist at the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, saying that he is being silenced when it comes to pesticide research. This is for the anti-media. As of this morning, it's got 12,000 shares through Facebook. Not bad. Hopefully it'll get more. On Wednesday, a researcher with the United States Department of Agriculture filed a whistleblower complaint alleging his supervisors suspended him in retaliation for his research on pesticides. The complaint follows calls for an investigation of both the USDA and the Environmental Protection Agency. According to the Washington Post, Jonathan Lundgren, an entomologist and 11-year veteran of the USDA's Agricultural Research Service, filed the complaint with the Federal Merit Systems Protection Board after his supervisors allegedly began to, quote, impede or deter his research and resultant publications. He is well known in the scientific community for previously alleging the USDA attempted to prevent him from speaking about his research for political reasons. The Washington Post reported, quote, the trouble began after he published research and gave interviews about the impact that certain common pesticides were having on pollinators, bees. According to a statement by Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, or PEER, which filed the complaint on his behalf, the whistleblower complaint says Lundgren's work showed the adverse effects of certain widely used pesticides, findings which have drawn national attention as well as the ire of the agricultural industry. So he's pissing some people off. The USDA says Lundgren was suspended for submitting research to a scientific journal without proper approval, and that he violated official travel policies related to lectures he gave in Philadelphia and Washington. Lundgren's complaint says the article's submission was not inappropriate, and he called the travel violations a paperwork error. He's previously published a study that found soybean seeds pre-treated with neonicotinoid pesticides, quote, offered little benefit to soybean producers. He also served as a peer reviewer in a report published by the Center for Food Safety. That study found further evidence that neonicotinoids adversely affect bees. Laura Dumas, staff counsel for PEER, condemned the USDA's decision to suspend the scientist, saying, having research published in prestigious journals and being invited to present before the National Academy of Sciences should be sources of official pride, not punishment. Politics inside the USDA have made entomology into a most dangerous discipline. One of his peers, Scott W. Fausti, recently published a paper in Environmental Science and Policy, and in that paper he wrote a footnote. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Jonathan Lundgren's contribution to this manuscript. Dr. Lundgren is an entomologist employed by the USDA. However, the USDA has required Dr. Lundgren to remove his name as a joint first author from this article. I believe this action raises a serious question concerning policy neutrality towards scientific inquiry. Several scientists coming out, speaking out about this. And this is not the first time the USDA has been called out for putting politics before science. In early May of this year, Truth in Media reported that 25 organizations representing farm workers, food safety organizations, and the environment sent a letter to officials with the USDA and Environmental Protection Agency. They called for investigation into claims that scientists are facing pressure and retaliation for research that presents the controversial neonicotinoid insecticide in a negative light. The group said they were concerned about a report from Reuters that detailed threats to scientists who speak about the dangers of the pesticide. So this is interesting because Reuters first reports that there's murmurs about scientists, whispers of scientists saying they're being threatened, their work's being pushed away related to pesticides, and also specifically related to genetically modified crops. And they say they face backlash, and specifically talking about the neonicotinoid pesticides. And these are the ones that have more and more been linked to not only harming bees and other pollinators, but rivers and birds and worms. I found, there's lots of research out there. And so again, these are pesticides that are increasingly, and insecticides that are increasingly used because of the rise of genetically modified crops and the rise of corporatism involving companies like Monsanto and Syngenta. And the neonics have been around since the early 1990s, and they've been linked, as I said several times, to bee colony collapse disorder. And it goes on from there. I want you to read this whole article. I give several examples of these studies showing that these pesticides are just horrible. And, we have to ask ourselves, how can we shift away from pesticide use and reliance on corporatism and still remain able to feed ourselves and to have, a national food industry that can still trade with other people and grow strong. And I think that is possible, but we have to sort of look to the past as we're moving forward, use technology that we have now to cultivate crops and be more creative. Permaculture, vertical gardens. I mean, we've got shipping container gardens. You have underground gardening. We have to utilize the technology that is available to us and the mines that are available to us, pull out the government roadblocks, and stop supporting this corporatism, localized, decentralized. These are the answers. They make sense in all areas of our life, but they absolutely make sense when it comes to our food production. Recognize that. Remember, resistance is fertile and the revolution is growing. Now, the last little section of stories we're going to do today have to do with surveillance, and then we're going to move on to meditation. And I'll be brief with these ones because, for me, honestly, surveillance, the topic, I write about it often because, I've been covering and researching stingrays and surveillance planes for a while. I've got a couple of good stories I'm working on now that'll be coming up soon involving surveillance planes in Houston. I just, went and paid $100 to get some documents, 800 pages of documents HPD has on me and the Houston Freethinkers. Hopefully we'll see how much of it's redacted and what's related or not. But my point is that surveillance is something that I care about. But at the same time, oh my God, it's redundant. Guess what? Here's a new tool the government's spying on you. Guess what? This way that you didn't think, they are also spying on you that way. Guess what? Your new favorite toy that you like, they're spying on you through it. It drags you down. But it's absolutely important because if you ever plan to counteract this surveillance, then you need to understand it. And you need to be as safe as possible. And even me knowing all this stuff, I'm not saying that I'm 100% off the grid and nobody, has any way. I mean, some people who are very creative hackers could easily get into all my computers and stuff. I don't use nearly enough encryption or protection, and I need to. And that's the direction I'm going in because it's worth it. And also we have to build alternatives. When it comes to internet surveillance, we got to focus on ideas like mesh networks and localized, decentralized networks of communication that don't rely on the mainstream systems. But let's get into this. Why is the IRS spying on Americans' phone calls? Well, because nobody's stopping them and because they have the tools to do it. Following the recent first ever, I want to stop first, say this is powerful stuff. First ever congressional hearing on stingray cell phone surveillance. I've been talking about this for 3 years. People have been reporting on it for 5+ years, and some people have known about it since the 90s. But it's really coming to the mainstream. I said at the beginning of 2014 that this year would be the year that stingrays really become mainstream topic. And yeah, I can't count the stories, how much they've been exposed. And it's from the work of journalists and activists like you guys, yourself, who are sharing information, sharing articles, sharing videos, writing articles, right? And making videos, protesting, info jamming, all the stuff that you're doing is having an effect. But, I don't think that them passing laws is going to stop it. But yes, we do have more people aware of it. Now we have to find ways to counteract it. So because of our work, Congress has been forced to talk about the stingray cell phone surveillance. And following that hearing, we now have new details showing that other agencies, new agencies that we didn't know, including the Secret Service and the Internal Revenue Service, are also using stingray surveillance. So this was last Wednesday, not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before that. Officials with the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security released new details about the federal government's use of stingray cell phone surveillance. If you don't know what stingrays are, you're going to have to catch up. I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's basically a tool that allows them to collect information off your cell phone and triangulate your location and things like that. And it works no matter what you do, unless your phone doesn't have a battery in it. The Justice Department told lawmakers that the DOJ is not collecting contents of the calls. They're saying they're just using the stingrays, for numbers dialed and people they're calling, location, time and day, but they're not saying they're not using the new ones, which can, however, gather your images, your sexting, your actual phone conversations, audio. And yeah, that's something you need to be aware of. And this comes after September, the Justice Department announced rules on how they will handle the use of stingrays, including new warrant requirements. After the rules were announced, Senator Patrick Leahy, the ranking member of the Senate's Judiciary Committee, challenged the warrant exemptions and the overall effectiveness of the rules, stating, "I will press the department to justify them." So he's like, I'm not buying it. And this is what I was going to say is I'm not buying it either. They can pass whatever laws they want, and it's good that we got them talking about it. But they've got the tools. They're building these billion-dollar centers in Utah to monitor, to hold data. They're not just going to stop using surveillance. I'm sorry, guys. We just have to find ways to fight it. As of last week, the Department of Homeland Security is now following similar rules to the DOJ. Woohoo! They're both following rules. But officials warned Congress that the devices could still be used without warrants in, quote, time-sensitive emergency situations. But who knows how they define that. California Congressman Ted Lieu, who's a member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, told CNN he believes, quote, the mass surveillance of people's cell phone signals requires a warrant. And the Associated Press reports that during the hearing, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Seth Stoddard revealed a new policy that allows Secret Service men to use cell site simulators without a warrant if they believe somebody is, quote, a non-specific threat to the president or another protected person. So, if the president's around and for whatever reason, you and your activist friends that are out there protesting, if they think you might be a threat, look over to that black van parked nearby, and chances are it's filled with cell site simulator technology and is probably taking everything it can off of your phone. Now, they say that under exceptional circumstances, they would make an exception, and only approval from executive level personnel at Secret Service headquarters would be necessary. But despite this, he promises they won't use these in routine criminal investigations. And just days after that hearing, The Guardian revealed that the IRS is also making use of the stingrays. The Guardian was able to obtain invoices, purchase orders from 2009-2012 via Freedom of Information Act request, showing the IRS working with the Harris Corporation, who is, of course, the producer and manufacturer of the Stingray brand of the cell site simulators. So now the tax man, the IRS, has the ability to use technology to gather contents of your conversation. And they actually have a Hailstorm. The Hailstorm is an upgraded version of the Stingray, which is capable of accessing the latest 4G LTE cell networks and gathering the actual contents of your conversation, including your images, location, and the numbers dialed. Boom! So next time you're talking to an IRS agent, make sure he's not hiding a cell site simulator under the table and gathering everything you got in your phone just to, for tax purposes, of course. And following the reports, the IRS responded to the allegations that they were using these. IRS Commissioner John Koskinen told the Senate Finance Committee that the use of Stingray is limited to criminal investigations of money laundering, terrorism, and financing of organized crime. He said it's only going to be used in criminal investigations. It can only be used with a court order. It can only be used based on probable cause of criminal activity. It is not to be used in civil matters at all. It is not to be used by other employees of the IRS. All right, we'll just go ahead and trust this guy because, the rest of the history of stingrays is a bunch of half-truths and outright lies and secrecy by the federal government, by the Harris Corporation, by the local police departments, and by every other single agency that signs non-disclosure agreements with this company and with the FBI to keep quiet on how they work. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to tell us the truth now. Not. And that is why it's important for you to educate yourself about those tools and learn how to counteract them. I've got one more story before we get to meditation. I wrote an article about this. It has not come out. It should be out on the Anti-Media tomorrow, Monday, November 2nd, or Tuesday, I imagine. I've got 2 new articles that'll be out there as well. And this one is just going to be brief, but it's just an update on the surveillance flights that I've told you about for a while. We found surveillance flights a couple months back. I did an interview that you can find on theconsciousresistance.com with Sam Richards of the North Star Post if you want the full story. This young man, 23 years old, independent journalist, using Twitter and his aviation knowledge, was able to expose that the Department of Justice, the FBI, is operating surveillance flights using planes that are owned by fake companies, and they were using them during the Baltimore protests, Ferguson. We've already known this. This is something that the independent media has exposed months ago. But bits and new details have begun to come out. Most recently, the ACLU was able to get documents that they requested several months ago and confirmed that the flights were actually using thermal imaging equipment and more than likely stingrays that we were just discussing. When the stingrays, the cell phone surveillance tools, are put into planes, they're by another company, Digital Receiver Technology, DRT, and they're DRT boxes, which are sometimes known as dirt boxes. So these dirt boxes can be put into planes. This was exposed last year by the Wall Street Journal, and they can gather tens of thousands of people's cell phone data in a single flight. So we have these surveillance planes, which we know for sure have thermal imaging equipment, cameras, high quality HD cameras, flying overhead, circling over important areas, and circling during the protests happening in Baltimore and in Ferguson, Missouri. So the documents, though, were heavily redacted, and we're not sure if they were using the dirt boxes, but it's absolutely possible, and the FBI doesn't really want to talk about this. The FBI is operating a secret fleet of surveillance planes, over 100 different planes, Department of Justice, the FBI, and we're finding out the DEA as well has these planes. And I've been doing, as I said, some research working with Sam Richards of the North Star Post to see what I can find more about these planes. And I guarantee you, if you live anywhere near a major city, these planes are flying overhead. Now, I've done the research and checked them in Houston, and sure enough, these same fake companies that are connected to the FBI and other agencies are operating here in Houston. And yeah, okay, they're flying over NASA. Okay, that's a possible terrorist hotspot, right? They want to protect that. They're flying over the port of Houston, which is, they've always said that that's a threat for terrorist attacks. I understand those things. I can see the justification for that. But then they're definitely flying over some different parts of the city that aren't malls or just particular neighborhoods. And we're going to look at the demographics of the people the neighborhoods they're surveilling. We're going to look at what activity was happening during those dates and really get to the bottom of this. But without a doubt, be aware, the federal government and other agencies are operating flights using thermal imaging equipment. I did a story last year that the USA Today first reported on, showing that they also have these tools. I need to look more into this, that can look into your home and see movement as small as you're breathing from 500 feet away, and using thermal imaging stuff. So they can see everything where you're at in your house and see you breathing, you whatever, having sex, talking, eating, whatever, and they can watch you. So I imagine they have similar things up in these planes. And this is something that we need to keep our eyes on, because apparently the Supreme Court has ruled and the federal government believes that they don't owe you any privacy if they're flying overhead. If they can fly overhead in airspace and happen to see what you're doing, that's fair game. So recognize that. They don't believe that you have a right to privacy or an expectation of privacy. And that's important. So check that story out. That's the end of the surveillance news. Thank you guys for listening to that. Now, the last topic we're going to talk about, we're going to move away, switch gears here, switch them gears away from the news for a moment. Put on the chill music, put on the good vibes. Let me just throw something on. All right, now we're flowing. And we're going to talk about meditation. And, I've got these pictures on display here. Some of these look really, peaceful. This is kind of new agey. Some people might be, oh, what is this new age crap? And this is what I want to do. My audience of supporters, followers of my journalism, and just friends who keep up with my work range from atheists who can put up with some of my spiritual talk, the spiritually curious who aren't really sure even what that word means, and others who are absolutely devoted to their passion and their beliefs, whether that's Christianity, whether that's Islam, whether that's something that you might term New Age, or native indigenous belief systems. and practitioners of meditation and yoga. This is the range of people that I talk to. So this video is going out to all of you, and I hope that you will learn something from this. I started out by saying, if you go to theconsciousresistance.com, my website, you can see that our logo is a meditating person sitting in this little halo with a banner that says the Conscious Resistance. And so, since that's in my logo, that's on our website, I figure I might as well explain to you, what does meditation have to do with my work. First, we're going to get a definition of meditation, and then we'll move to why I have this meditating person sitting in my logo, and what it means to the Conscious Resistance, what it means to you as an activist, and how it can help you. So first of all, meditation, let's get an official definition here real quick, and then I'll give you guys my definition, and the definition that we wrote for my book, The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, in our chapter. So, meditation, the act or process of meditating, a devotional exercise of or leading to contemplation, a contemplative discourse, usually on a religious or philosophical subject. So, the act or process of meditating, devotional exercise, leading to contemplation, contemplative discourse. We see twice there they mention contemplation. So this is what I want to focus on, is that meditation is essentially an act or a practice that gets you to a contemplative, mindful state of mind, state of being. Now, what does that mean? It means where you can sort of clear away the static and clear away the clutter and be in a place where, not where everything's perfect, where you're floating, on rainbows and, your life works beautifully and you have no issues. No, it's simply just getting to that state of mind, however brief, where you can be present in the moment and have time to contemplate and to consider and to really take a balanced look at your life and your circumstances and surroundings. And it's also, of course, a state of relaxation. Some would say it's our natural state, that we're actually pulled away from that. And this meditation, most often though, it takes form and the way we see in these pictures here, which is somebody sitting down, cross-legged, with their hands, in some different position. These are called mudras, and they all have different meaning depending on what your belief system is, Buddhism, Hinduism, and what type of meditation it is. So these are all different types of meditation poses. There's various sects of Buddhism that have different types of meditations that go along with different meanings. You can see a monk here sitting meditating. This is from Thailand, a Buddhist monk. And so generally, these people are coming to sit, to still their mind, to have time to get away from the busyness of the world. And meditation has really taken on a rise in the Western world since the 60s, really since the 50s and 60s, when Buddhism and Eastern thought was first brought to America and really started to become popularized, specifically Buddhism. Now, I have been educated through my own reading and through going to the Houston Zen Center, listening to lectures from various Zen masters and Zen speakers, and my own meditation practice. That's my most, large understanding comes from Zen. And with Zen was basically, well, let me back up for a second. Buddhism itself, of course, is of the teachings of the Buddha, Siddhartha. And he was said to have been a prince, and, he went through both sides of life, the really extreme aesthetic, renouncing everything, almost starving himself, and lived in royalty and all these things, and eventually settling upon the middle path. And he came to the middle path when one day he was meditating under the Bodhi tree, and he achieved enlightenment and began teaching. And so over the years after his death, Buddhism split off into various forms in different countries. And you have some like Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of different gods and there's a lot of rituals. Well, as I said, I'm most familiar with Zen. Zen was basically a rejection of all that. It was like, okay, we've got a lot of rituals, we got books, we have all this stuff now, and these are helpful to keep us mindful and aware of the Buddha as the Buddha's thought. But Zen was like, what really matters is meditating. That's what Buddha was doing when he achieved enlightenment. That's what we need to focus on. So Zen focuses on zazen, which is to sit. It's meditation. So that's what I've learned a lot. And, just some background on that. And please, for those who might be more educated than me, I've been meditating inconsistently for going on 10 years now. And but Zen and Zazen it's really strict in some ways, and it's basically about trying to still the mind, constantly taking the mind to a place of balance in order to achieve liberation through instantaneous liberation through recognition that everything is what it is. And this is kind of paradoxical thought that goes into Zen and the philosophy behind it. That's the form of meditation that we're dealing with here. So that's what I'm most familiar with. But at the same time, I also am open to a number of different types of meditation. And as I said, when you start to do your own research, you're going to see different people who advocate very strictly for their type of meditation. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I think that all types of meditation can bring different types of responses. And if you're trying to learn from a very specific type of philosophy or religion or spiritual practice or meditation, then yeah, maybe following their strict guidelines to achieve what they say you can achieve through that path is necessary. And I like to learn from all these various forms, because maybe within the form, the set of one single meditation, when you go down to sit at your mat, or to sit, outside, or to sit wherever you sit, you might go through a range of them. So let me give you some background though on just a little bit of Zen. So you're going to be sitting down on your butt, with your legs crossed. And as I said, you can do half lotus or full lotus, which is where both your legs are crossed over the other, or maybe you just have one. And then you put your hands down in front of you. You can put your hands down resting on your knees, or, closed hands together on your lap, or you can do one of the various mudras, which have different meanings. Look into those and kind of look what feels right to you. And, often what people will say is, I have trouble meditating, I don't know how to. And this is why I want to define, what it is. It's as we said, it's a practice that brings you to a contemplative state of mind. Sidebar real quick here before I get into types of meditation and ways to meditate. I want to read you something briefly from my book, because as I said, we mentioned meditation in our chapter 7, which is on conscious healing. And this section here basically is just going to touch on yoga, meditation, and breathing and shamanism. So I want to read this to you real quickly here. Despite the apparent differences in the practices, meditation, yogic breathing, and the trance produced through shamanic exercises seem to create a similar state of mind. Meditation itself is a practice as old as human life. As long as human beings have been conscious, we have come to nature for quiet contemplation and reflection. Over time, a great number of meditation practices have been developed, each with its own instructions and insights. While we value and respect these individual methods, we note that nearly any experience can be meditative. There is something to be said for a balanced posture and proper breathing, but a bike ride, a walk under the stars, writing poetry, or any practice that offers individual quiet time within your own heart and mind can be considered a form of meditation. The consistent application of bringing one's attention to the present moment is key to any form of meditation. Remaining in the present moment, either through counting breaths, mantras, or contemplative thought, allows long dormant emotions to rise to the surface. From that point, an individual can assess how best to deal with the new data. So as I said there, to me, one of my favorite forms of meditation, besides literally, sitting down, like a sitting meditation, staring at the wall, clearing my mind for 10 to 15 minutes in the morning, or sometimes longer sessions, is biking. Biking is hugely meditative for me. It's something I do nearly every day. I bike about 12 miles a day, and it gives me time to really process my thoughts. I find that some of my best ideas for videos or rants or essays or articles will come to me in those experiences. And that's important to remember. So we're going to focus for a moment on sitting meditations and types of those, and what your thought process can be in those. But you have to remember that it's not just sitting meditation. There's also, of course, laying meditation. There's walking meditation. These are a part of Zen. Zen does include a walking meditation practice. And so those are all different forms of those. But as I said, it can be anything. So maybe you get into this contemplative, mindful state of being when you're sewing, when you're playing music. Music is definitely a huge meditation. But what what the sitting does and what is laying down does, as opposed to those other types of acts that you might do, like, maybe you love to ride your bike, but you're not necessarily thinking like, oh, I'm meditating out of this. You're just like, oh wow, I feel good, I love, the endorphins that are released when I ride my bike and I get time to think. But what's coming to a regular place when you have, like, say, an altar, or just a seat cushion, or even a pillow that you just know this is your space. You have a little sanctuary where you can keep the good vibes, the energy, whatever you want to say, around that area where you have a regular place to meditate. It allows you to go into that setting, into that mindset, and to know, okay, when I sit here, it's time to put my cell phone away over there, clear myself of all distractions, and really get into that state of mind and be into that state of mind for a period of time. So that's what I want to shift now to. And just some brief advice here is that we can come to sit at our table, at our altar, or our pillow, our wall, whatever you choose, and do it as often as you can. I think that's helpful even for 5 minutes a day. If you're a super busy person and you're working in the office, or you're working in the shop, or whatever it is you do all day, when you come home and you're super exhausted and you got to take care of your family and cook food or eat food, or clean up your house, whatever it is, just make sure to give yourself 5 minutes a day, even just 5 minutes, to go to your little space and to sit and relax your body. This is a one form of meditation that I do sometimes, is you just start from your toes and lay back, and one by one, from, like, say, toes, like, you're relaxing and just become conscious of your toes, kind of wiggle them. And I literally tried to move my consciousness to the toes, like feeling the toes and thinking about, like, wow, like, damn, like, without my toes, I couldn't do anything. And then moving your awareness to your feet, like just giving thanks, and that notice, that appreciation, becoming conscious of that piece of yourself, one by one, your toes, your feet, then like your legs, your knees, thinking about all these pieces, really giving thanks. It sounds maybe silly to some of you, but I think it's something that's absolutely missing from our modern world. And it's that consciousness, awareness of ourselves in these individual pieces, but also in a whole, in a whole holistic fashion as part of this larger system. So, go up each of your body, and by the time you get to your head, I promise you, you are in just a state of relaxed bliss. You're just sitting there, and just, like I said, focus on your attention on these pieces of you. And maybe through that, you start reflecting on your day. By the time you get through that and your whole body's relaxed, just think about your day from beginning to end, and start to think of, I like to ask people when I'm with friends, just randomly, so guys, what's one thing you're all thankful for today? Or what was the best part of your day today? Just get people thinking, just get them to stop for a moment. And that's what you can do for yourself, is just to stop there in that moment and really process these thoughts and be, wow, yeah, oh, I forgot. And I find, you start thinking about your whole day and everything you did and all the conversations you encountered and the people you encountered, and you remember things that you forgot throughout the day, through your busy day. You're like, oh, wow, yeah, I ran into so-and-so. We had this great conversation. I totally forgot about that. It's powerful. It's simple, and it's powerful. So that's important. If you don't have time to literally go sit down cross-legged and face a wall, some people like to have their eyes open. Some people like to have their eyes closed. Some people, you're maybe 5 or 6 feet from the wall, and you stare at soft gaze at a spot 3 or 4 feet in front of you, and you just relax. Some people say they don't know how to start meditating. A good, easy practice is just to focus on your breathing. So you're sitting down, cross-legged, you got your hands on your knees or hands in front of you. Straight back posture is important. Sitting back, relax upright on your hips, sitting up, and just breathe in. And while you're breathing in, just think 1. And breathe out 1. Breathe in, and you're thinking 2. And just do that. And it's a really slow process. And within a couple of tries, you're going to be thinking, oh, I'm really hungry. What should I have? Or I got to do this for work later. It's okay. You're going to find yourself veering off the path of meditation. People say that to me often, like, man, I hear you write about meditation or talking about how much it helped you and changed your life, or, as a tool that you can use. But I'm to this or that. And stop programming yourself to think negatively about yourself. Also, I think we need to stop surrounding ourselves with so much distractions. And I'm definitely guilty of this. But before you're going to try to meditate, you don't just go straight from like watching 10 different things on YouTube, listening to the radio, and, interacting with people, to just walk into a quiet room and start meditating. You have to kind of prep yourself to get to the meditative state of mind. So start, stilling your mind, get away from the computer or whatever for a minute, the TV, Netflix, and just kind of relax, get yourself pre-meditative ready to like really get prepared. Okay, like I'm breathing, let me just clear my thoughts of everything. And eventually you'll have an easier time at that, but you still will find yourself thinking of things, and that's fine. What I try to do and what I've learned is, you see your thoughts like passing clouds. So they're drifting by and you notice them, you find yourself, oh, I'm thinking about work again. Okay, well, let me thank you, work. Let me take that and set it aside, and it just keeps floating by, and then center yourself again, and you just start your breath counting again. And you might never get above 5, but it's still helpful. Just keep going back to it, keep centering yourself. And this is something that becomes easier over time. But also, even if you don't think it's helping you, I promise you it is. What happens is basically over a while, your meditation, your direct form of meditation, sitting, laying, biking, whatever you are conscious of a meditative practice, trying to bring yourself to contemplation and to mindfulness, it becomes much easier to do this out of those experiences. So when you have difficult discussions and conversations and somebody's attacking you or whatever, you can take yourself to that balanced standpoint and say, you know what? Be the Buddha in every moment. I'm going to just hear what they're saying. I don't like the way they're talking to me. I don't like this experience, the feelings it's bringing up in me, but I'm going to look at them and recognize them and see the power in them and own them rather than letting them control me and letting my ego let me react. So it becomes easier in this process to be in that more meditative state of mind by having a regular practice. And I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. I'm not coming to you as somebody who believes he's a Zen master and has it all figured out. But so yeah, you're going to have your thoughts veering back and forth. It's okay. Bring yourself back to center. So that's when you're trying to clear your mind, right? You're trying to just be there and just breathe and have different practices. Maybe you have a mantra. Some people have words they repeat to themselves to kind of keep their mind on that. And again, you find yourself veering off, just come back to your word. So there's that. But there's also another form of meditation that I find is helpful, and that is actually just still coming down and sitting and staring at the wall or sitting at your space and just being in the good spot, but actually letting those thoughts come up and then sitting there with no other distractions but those thoughts. Because that's the thing, is sometimes when we have painful situations or hurtful situations, we do whatever we can to distract ourselves from actually dealing with them rather than processing them and getting stronger by healing from them. So in the meditative state of mind, you can clear away all the other distractions and just be there and be like, okay, well, yeah, I've got this job situation, I need to deal with. I hate my job. I've got this job offer or this relationship or whatever it may be, the struggle that you are currently dealing with, big or small. Just take the time to sit there and be like, okay, I'm going to sit here. And it's not about conquering this thing, but it's like, I'm going to sit here and put my mind to this and really let all my feelings come to the surface and think about it and process it and get clear-headed and try to come to a decision. And now that's a helpful thing. I'll do that as well. Sometimes in one meditation, I start with the mind clearing and counting my breath for a while. And then again, as thoughts come up, if a thought continues to come up and you say thank you and you put it aside, maybe if something continues to come up, that's a sign that you should either deal with it right then, and then maybe you start processing, okay, I keep thinking about my mom, let me think about this. Or you just, after your meditation and after you've cleared your mind, okay, well, I kept thinking about this situation. Now that I'm done with my, meditation, let me sit here and meditate on this situation. So there's a number of different ways to go about that. Some people also prefer music during their meditation. They feel like it helps them relax. Others do not. And I would say in more of like a Zen monastery and a center setting, there's not going to be music. It's going to be real quiet and still. But when you're in your own home and your own meditation groups, you can choose to do what you will. Another form of meditation that's helpful for me is drumming, percussion. I play a djembe and several other drums. And this is something else I touch in my book. It's that state of entrainment, the trance state. It can come from repetition, whether it's that yogi, meditating, or the counting of your breath that's bringing you back to the present moment, or the drum beat, dun, 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 the repetition. So these are all different forms of meditation and entrainment that can get your mind to a really clear-headed state and allow you to help process and think about things. Now, again, with a Zen state of mind, they would say in Zen, there is no goal. So if you're starting out with meditation because you're like, this is going to help me with my anger, this is going to help me achieve enlightenment, then some would say you're already on the wrong path. But at the same time, those things will happen as a process. Like I said, you can definitely learn how to process your emotions better, to control your anger, to control your reactions. You get more relaxed. It's easier to just deal with things. You're never going to come to a state of enlightenment where life fucking works out perfectly and you're floating on rainbows and all blissed out. But no, you can still come to a place where you have a better ability to process and deal with those situations that do arise. So, yeah, we covered that what meditation is. We covered different types of meditations, some ideas. As I said, the starting with the feet and going up to the head, just kind of bringing your consciousness there and giving thanks to each of that. That's good to do whether you're sitting or laying. I think it's helpful when you're laying because you can kind of really just completely relax and just melt down. And then a lot of sitting meditations are good for me. So find something that works for you. And even if you are somebody that thinks it's that static, find a place. I promise you, everybody has the ability to meditate. It's not something that you can't do. You can do it. It's just about finding a way to get yourself into that groove. And I promise you, there are many, many benefits to it waiting on the other side for you. This has been proved in study after study, scientifically, that there are benefits to us meditating. And I would say that Buddhism and the long history of Eastern traditions of meditation and traditions all over the world have proved that time and time again. So that's my bit on meditation. I wish you happy meditating, friends. Please do consider that, and speaking of that, it's time for me to get meditating. So I'm out of here. It's been another fun time talking with you. I said it was going to be 45 minutes. I think I went an hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot to talk about this week. And I hope that you Patreon supporters enjoy this. Those of you who are watching this after the fact on YouTube, I hope you enjoy this. If you want to get these videos ahead of time, plus exclusive podcasts and videos that you won't see anywhere else, you can sign up for that on patreon.com/Derrick Broze, Patreon, patreon.com/Derrick Broze, to support me directly and get more content and rewards and stuff like that. Please remember to follow The Conscious Resistance on Facebook. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow me on Twitter at dbrosLiveFree. And if you would, go to theconsciousresistance.com, scroll on down to the bottom, and you'll see at the bottom left there, it says newsletter sign up. Put your email in there and put subscribe. I'm sending out weekly newsletters now of all of a wrap of our content, plus some of my most interesting articles I'm seeing from around the web. I'm going to start giving you guys a little